It was just a regular evening when I came home. The weight of the long day at work was still fresh, and my tired feet could feel every step as I climbed up to our small apartment on the third floor. The familiar scent of our home greeted me, and for a moment I hoped for a quiet evening. But that hope was quickly shattered as soon as I opened the door. I found Mark, my husband, lounging on the old brown couch. He had the remote in one hand and a half-empty beer in the other. The TV was blaring some show or another, but Mark's focus shifted to me as soon as I stepped in. "Betty," he started, not even greeting me. "I want a pie tonight." I blinked in surprise. "Mark, I just got back from work and I'm really tired. Can we have it tomorrow instead?" He didn't look happy. "You're home now, aren't you? So make a pie. It's not that hard." I sighed. I remembered my mother always said to be understanding and accommodating, but sometimes it felt like it was always me doing the accommodating. Nevertheless, I headed to the kitchen, deciding that making a pie might be the quicker route to peace. The apartment wasn't big, just a single bedroom, a living area combined with a dining space, and a small kitchen. I quickly gathered the ingredients, hoping to finish the pie as soon as possible. As I was rolling out the dough, Mark strolled into the kitchen. "Make sure it's apple and none of that store-bought crust stuff," he instructed. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We had store-bought crust, but I knew better than to use it. Now I made the pie from scratch, just like he wanted. It took me a good hour to prepare everything. The aroma of the baking pie filled the apartment, and for a moment, everything felt cozy and right. I dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, this pie could be the start of a pleasant evening. But when the timer went off and I took the pie out, letting it cool on the counter, my hopes were dashed again. Mark was back in the kitchen, barely waiting for the pie to cool down before taking a big slice. After a few bites, his face contorted in displeasure. Without a word, he picked up the plate and threw the pie slice onto the floor, where it landed with a sad splat. "That was terrible," he spat out. I was stunned. All my efforts, all the care I put into that pie. And this was the reaction I got. Tears filled my eyes, but I tried to hold them back. What was wrong with it? I managed to ask. I said tentatively. "Everything?" he replied curtly. "You should know better." I didn't know what to say. I felt so small, so insignificant. The shattered pie on the floor seemed like a reflection of our relationship, broken and messy. Feeling defeated, I cleaned up the mess, the weight of years of unhappiness pressing down on me. It wasn't just about the pie. It was about everything. The lack of appreciation, the constant demands, the way Mark looked at me or didn't look at me. All of it. That night, I knew I needed a break. I couldn't stay in that apartment. I needed to be with someone who understood, someone who cared. That's why I turned to William, my brother. He had always been my rock. Grabbing my bag and leaving the mess behind, I decided to spend the night at his place. William's home was a cozy 2-story building with a small garden in the front. I didn't even have to knock. He must have heard my car because he opened the door before I reached it, his face filled with concern. "Betty," he started, pulling me into a comforting hug. "What happened?" Tears streamed down my face as I mumbled. "He threw the pie, Will. The pie I made after a long day at work. He just threw it on the floor." William led me inside, settling me on the soft couch in his living room. "Tell me everything," he urged, handing me a cup of hot tea. Sipping the warm drink, I began to recount the events of the evening. As I spoke, memories of the past also surfaced. "It wasn't just tonight, Will. It's been this way for years. I always thought things would change, that he would change. Remember when we first met at Jenna's party? He was so charming then, I reminisced. William nodded. I remember. But Betty, people can put on a facade for a while, but their true colors always come out, you know. I continued. When we first got married, everything was great. We'd go on dates, laugh, talk for hours. But as the years went by, he changed. Or maybe I just saw the real him. William's face tightened. He didn't start off this way. I shook my head. No, we'd have our disagreements, but it was never like this. Over the years, he just became more demanding, more critical. I don't know when I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells around him. William sighed deeply. You know, Mom and Dad had their issues, but Dad never treated Mom this way. I know, I replied, tears forming again. I thought I could change him, make him see how hurtful he was being, but no matter what I did, it was never good enough. William looked at me seriously. Betty, love doesn't work that way. You can't change someone who doesn't see a problem in their actions. I looked down, taking another sip of my tea. I remember when Mom and Dad would argue, but Dad would always apologize, always make up for it. Mark never does. There was a pause, then William said, Betty, you deserve better. Remember when we were kids, we promised each other we'd always be there? I'm here for you now. You need to think about yourself, your happiness. I nodded, taking in his words. The realization was growing within me. This wasn't the life I envisioned for myself. I deserved respect, love, and care. And it was clear I wasn't going to get that from Mark. You're right, I finally admitted. I can't keep living like this. It's time to make a change. William squeezed my hand. I'll be with you every step of the way. The morning light filtered through the curtains of William's guest room. I stretched, feeling more rested than I had in a long time. The decision to divorce Mark had brought with it a mixture of relief and apprehension. Walking downstairs, I found William already up, making breakfast in the kitchen. Morning, sis, he greeted with a warm smile. Good morning, I replied, pulling up a chair at the dining table. He placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of me. You need to eat. Big day today, he said. I nodded, taking a bite. I'm nervous, Will, but it's the right thing to do. He sat across from me, sipping his coffee. It's never easy, but remember, you're doing this for yourself, and I'm right here with you. After breakfast, William drove me to the lawyer's office. As we parked, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for the steps ahead. Inside, we were greeted by Mrs. Harris, a stern-looking woman with sharp eyes. But as she spoke, her kindness shone through. Betty, I understand this is a difficult time for you. My job is to guide you through the legal process and make sure your interests are protected, she said. Thank you, I whispered, feeling grateful for her support. The meeting was long, filled with paperwork and legalities. Mrs. Harris explained everything patiently, ensuring I understood my rights and the process ahead. As the days turned into weeks, life became a whirlwind of appointments, meetings, and paperwork. Mark, to my surprise, remained silent throughout this time. He neither signed the divorce papers nor contested them. He simply seemed to have disappeared. This silence was unsettling. One evening, while sitting with William in his living room, I expressed my concerns. It's strange, Will. Mark hasn't reacted at all. No calls, no messages, nothing. It's like he's vanished. William looked thoughtful. It is odd, especially given how he was earlier. But maybe he realized his mistakes and wants to move on. I hope so, I sighed, though a nagging doubt lingered. Life continued its pace. I started looking for a new place to live, wanting a fresh start, a home where I could rebuild my life without the shadows of the past. After a few weeks of searching, I found a beautiful house. It was spacious, with large windows letting in plenty of light, a stark contrast to the dim apartment I had shared with Mark. I felt a connection the moment I stepped in. This was my new beginning. William was ecstatic when he saw the place. "It's perfect for you, Betty, a place to call your own," he said as we toured the house. I shared my plans with him. "I want to paint the walls light blue, maybe have some plants by the windows," he chuckled. Always the planner. It sounds wonderful. Moving in was a joyous occasion. With the help of William and a few friends, the house quickly started to feel like a home. Every evening after work, I'd return to my sanctuary, relishing the peace it brought. However, that peace was short-lived. One fateful evening, as I returned home, I found the front door ajar. A chill ran down my spine. Pushing the door open, I stepped in cautiously. The sight that greeted me was unexpected and alarming. There in the living room sat Mark. My heart raced as I took in the scene before me. "What are you doing here, Mark?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, his face showing a mix of smugness and defiance. "Well, it's our house, isn't it? We're still married, Betty," he retorted. "But I bought this house after we separated. It has nothing to do with you," I shot back. Mark sneered, leaning back in the chair. "Doesn't matter. As your husband, I have every right to be here." Just then, Anna, my neighbor, walked in, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Betty. He showed me his ID and marriage certificate. He said he had the right to be here." I sighed. "It's okay, Anna. This isn't your fault." Turning my attention back to Mark, I said firmly, "You need to leave, Mark. This is my home, not yours." Mark chuckled. "Think again, sweetheart. I'll be staying here, and if you try to kick me out, I'll make sure to claim half of everything in our divorce." The audacity of his claim left me reeling. I felt trapped, cornered in my own home, but I couldn't let him see my fear. I needed to be strong. "Fine," I said, trying to sound calm. "Stay tonight, but tomorrow I'm getting a lawyer, and we'll see who has the right to be here." Mark smirked. "Bring it on. I'm not going anywhere." Feeling defeated, I retreated to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. I needed to think, to come up with a plan. Grabbing my phone, I called William. "Will?" I said, tears forming. "He's here at the house. He says he has a right to it." William's voice was filled with anger and concern. "Stay calm, Betty. I'm on my way. We'll sort this out." Hanging up, I tried to calm my racing heart. Mark's sudden reappearance and bold claims had taken me by surprise, but with William by my side, I felt a glimmer of hope. Within minutes, William arrived. I heard the two of them talking in hushed tones downstairs. The tension in the air was palpable. After what felt like an eternity, William came up to my room. "Betty," he began, his face serious, "there's something you need to know. When we bought this house, I made sure it was in my name. I had a feeling Mark might pull something like this. Legally, he has no claim to this property." A wave of relief washed over me. "Thank you, Will. I don't know what I would do without you," I said, hugging him. "We're family. We look out for each other." The next morning, armed with the property papers and William's unwavering support, I confronted Mark. Seeing the documents, he realized he had no ground to stand on. His smugness from the night before had disappeared. "This isn't over, Betty," he hissed as he left. Days turned into weeks, and with every passing day, the intrusion by Mark felt more like a distant memory, but the threat he posed remained. William and I, however, weren't about to sit idly by. One evening as we sat in the living room, William looked at me with a seriousness I had seldom seen. "Betty, I've been thinking. We need to be prepared for any moves Mark might make. He's unpredictable." I nodded. "I've been feeling the same, but what can we do?" William paused, taking a deep breath. "I've hired a private detective. I wanted to know what Mark's been up to since the two of you separated." I looked at him in shock. "A private detective, Will? Is that necessary?" William sighed. "I just have this gut feeling. I want to make sure we have all our bases covered." I understood William's concerns. His protective nature was one of the things I cherished most about him. "All right," I conceded. "What did the detective find?" William pulled out a folder from his bag, spreading the photos and documents on the table. My heart sank. The pictures showed Mark with various women, some looking familiar from our past life. One document caught my eye. A police report filed by a woman against Mark. "He did this," I whispered, disbelief evident in my voice. William nodded gravely. "It appears Mark's activities haven't been on the straight and narrow. This could be our leverage if he tries to make any more moves against you. We can use this against him." I felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal. "I can't believe he sunk this low," I said. William put a reassuring hand on mine. "We'll get through this, Betty. Together." A few days later, our preparation proved to be fortuitous. A letter arrived from Mark's attorney, making wild claims and threats about taking me to court for supposed shared assets and conjuring up fabricated tales about our life together. Reading the letter, my hands shook, but William, ever the pillar of strength, looked at me and said, "We're ready for this, Betty. We've got evidence he can't intimidate us with." With William's support, we met with Mrs. Harris again. As she read through the letter and went over the evidence we had against Mark, her face remained unreadable. After a long pause, she finally said, "We have a strong case here. Mark's claims are baseless, especially with the evidence we have. We'll counter this, don't worry." Relief washed over me, but the idea of facing Mark in court was still daunting. William, sensing my anxiety, squeezed my hand. "We've got this. I won't let him hurt you anymore." The counter-move was set in motion. Mrs. Harris swiftly drafted a response highlighting Mark's activities and questioning the credibility of his claims. The ball was now in Mark's court. Every day after that was a game of wait and watch. William and I spent many evenings going over the possibilities, preparing for any scenario. Through it all, William's unwavering support gave me the strength to face each day. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when the knock echoed through the house. With a look of mutual surprise, I went to open the door. Standing there was a woman, soaked to the bone, her eyes red from crying. "Are you Betty?" she asked, her voice shaky. I nodded cautiously. "Yes, who are you?" She took a deep breath. "My name is Jenna. I was involved with Mark." My heart skipped a beat. "Come in," I said, motioning for her to enter. Once seated, Jenna began her story. "I met Mark a few months ago. At first he seemed charming, but soon he started showing his true colors. I heard about you, about his past, and I thought I should come and warn you." "Warn me?" I thought. What could be worse than what I already knew? Jenna continued, tears streaming down her face. "He became aggressive, possessive. He said things about you, about how you'd ruined his life, and he wanted revenge." William's face darkened. "What kind of revenge?" Jenna hesitated, looking down. He talked about ruining you financially, said he had friends who could make it happen. The room was silent for a few minutes, the gravity of Jenna's words sinking in. Finally, William broke the silence. We need to do something about this. We can't let him continue to terrorize people. I nodded in agreement, feeling a newfound determination. We need to expose him. Let everyone know who he really is. Over the next few weeks, with Jenna's help, William and I gathered more evidence against Mark, from his financial misdeeds to his numerous affairs. The depth of his deceit became apparent. It wasn't just me he had hurt. There were others, just like Jenna. With everything we had, William suggested we go to the police. It's time he faces the consequences of his actions. Walking into the police station, I felt a mix of fear and hope. Would they believe us? Would they take action? Detective Rogers was assigned to our case. As we laid out our evidence, he listened intently, occasionally asking questions. Finally, after what felt like hours, he spoke. This is substantial evidence. We'll investigate further, but from what you've shown, it's clear that Mark has been involved in illegal activities. The next few days were a blur. The police acted swiftly, arresting Mark on multiple charges. The news spread, and soon, the monster I had once called my husband was unmasked to the world. Months passed after the revelation. With Mark behind bars, I should have felt safer, and while there was certainly a sense of relief, there was also the constant fear of what Mark's friends might do, those he had often bragged about, who he said would always have his back. One day, as I was returning from work, I noticed something odd. My mail was scattered all over the porch, and the front door looked like someone tried to tamper with it. Panic surged. Could this be one of Mark's allies? I immediately called William. "Will, I think someone tried to break in. Stay calm," he replied, his voice firm. "I'll be right over." I waited inside my car until William arrived. Surveying the scene, he confirmed my suspicions. "It looks like an attempted break-in. We need to beef up your security." Over the next few days, William and I worked on improving the safety of the house, installing security cameras, and an advanced alarm system. One evening, as we were testing the systems, the alarm suddenly blared. Rushing to the monitor, we saw a man skulking around the property. But before he could make any moves, the local police, alerted by the security company, arrived and apprehended him. I felt a rush of gratitude towards William. His foresight had prevented another potential disaster. The next day, Detective Rogers called. "Betty, we've got the intruder in custody. He claims he was sent by Mark, but we're still confirming the details." This confirmed my worst fears. Mark was still trying to control and hurt me, even from jail. Days later, I got a call from Jenna. "Betty, there's something you should know." She hesitated before speaking. "Mark's been reaching out to people from prison. He's been trying to spread lies about you." I gritted my teeth. "Thank you, Jenna. He won't get away with this." That evening, William had an idea. "Betty, we need to turn the tables. We've got evidence, Jenna's testimony, and a lot more. Let's go public." The next week, with the help of William's contacts, we scheduled a press conference. The media turnout was massive, with numerous reporters eager to hear my side of the story. As I stepped up to the podium, my heart pounded. "Hello, everyone. Today, I want to share my story, not just to expose Mark's cruelty, but to give hope to all those who've been in abusive relationships." I detailed everything, and as I spoke, the room was silent, every eye focused on me. When I finished, the questions began. "Do you believe Mark is still a threat?" I replied confidently. "Yes, but I won't let him or anyone else intimidate me any longer." Another reporter asked, "How do you feel about him now?" I paused for a moment. I pity him. For someone to have so much hate, he must be truly miserable. After the press conference, the support was overwhelming. Messages poured in from all over, many from women sharing their own experiences. It was clear that by speaking out, I had ignited a movement. That evening, as I sat with William, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, Will, for everything, for being there when I felt alone." William smiled warmly. Family sticks together. Weeks turned into months, and life started to regain its rhythm. I reconnected with friends, started a support group for victims of abuse, and even began dating again. On my birthday, I held a small get-together, and as everyone left, William sat down next to me. "You've done well, Betty," he said, tears glistening. "With a little help from my friends." He chuckled. "Always."
All right, everyone's presentations are done, Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread. hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.